All right, and welcome everyone to this very exciting special event. We're really blessed to have Ramy Youssef join us today for a conversation. Alhamdulillah, we're trying to be on time, right? And which is, I know, something our community is not really well practiced at, but we're going to try and do that this time. So Ramy has a hard stop at 6 o'clock.
6:05.
6:05. Okay, cool. We have 5 extra minutes. Alhamdulillah. So we're really blessed to have this conversation. Ramy has been a stand-up comedian for over a decade. He has he's well known for making the first Muslim American TV sitcom. And come on in, guys. You just flew right in under the radar. And has done a lot of really trailblazing work. And as we know, like trailblazers definitely have a very difficult time. They're out in the woods with the machete trying to carve a path for the people behind them. And I'm sure that there's a lot of blowback that they get that they probably didn't expect. And so I think that's a really interesting thing that we could potentially explore. But we're really excited to have conversations here about some of the really difficult challenges that he has dealt with in his work. Here at the Usuli Institute, we definitely love to talk about challenging issues of how to be a religious, pious Muslim, and navigating the challenges of our day in the modern age. And so I think we have a lot of really interesting grounds to cover. We are going to be really mindful of the time. If you have questions, we have some note cards here with pens, and so please just write your questions, and then you can hand them to Ahmed, and then that way we can kind of handle things more efficiently. And with that, I want to just get into the conversation since we are really excited for this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Ramy.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really excited.
So I know, actually let me start by asking, how many people have actually watched Ramy, the series on Hulu? So most everybody?
Netflix.
On
and HBO Go.
Oh,
okay, yes. And how many people have watched the stand-up special called Feelings? So there's a fewer people. So that's good to know. So I know,
good data to have.
Yeah.
They don't give me data, so it's good to know.
Oh, good. Well, we actually, we opened it up. We asked people to send questions in also, and it was really interesting because, of course, however you feel about it. Some people were very passionate, in a good way, and passionate in maybe in a not so good way.
Yeah, let's lead with those.
Okay. But I think, it's all good because it really just opens up the conversation. Yeah. And I think that art is such an important, vehicle for humanizing, especially Muslims in this difficult time. And I'm sure that, you have probably received a lot of reactions that you weren't anticipating from the beginning. And it would be wonderful to start with just kind of like, what were you thinking when you sort of started this project, and then sort of the reaction that you've gotten, and maybe some of the surprising things. So.
What was I thinking in terms of audience reaction?
Well, what were you setting out to do when you
were
creating?
Setting out to do was making something that felt spiritually aspirational. I wanted to make something where I felt like there was always this view when you talk about faith, and this isn't just being Muslim, it's just when you talk about faith in film, it either gets put in a category of people who are bashing it and kind of very against it and kind of trying to pull away and using art to kind of say, okay, I'm an artist and I don't want to feel the oppression, the negativity, the whatever it is that I felt from my religious experience. And so you see that in the characters, you see that in the world, you see that, from the press about the show to whatever's in the show or the movie. There's that end, and there's the other end that is, it's almost like this blown out version of religion, where it's like, it's literally in heaven with angels, or it's literally, someone who's like this priest who also does cocaine, and it's very kind of cartoonish. That was another depiction that I felt is a trope that I'm watching, and so it's either people kind of embracing it in this funny, ironic way, or pushing it away completely, and then there's a third category which is literally called faith-based films that no one on earth really wants to watch. like even the people who it's catered to, it's homework, and they're kind of like, yeah, look, we're watching the thing, this is exciting, but they're not. No one's excited. No one's happy with that. And so what I wanted to do was make something that was introspective to a character who does believe. He's actually not even questioning his faith. He's questioning himself. And there's what he believes, and then there's what he actually does. And the goal was to show the struggle in that gap between those two things, and try and make that as real and as grounded as possible, so that when there is something that has spiritual resonance, it can actually sit in the gravity of it can sit in a balanced environment, in a balanced reality, because you've shown certain things that faith-based films would never show because they break the faith. But because we do show those things because they are real, whether that be sex, whether that be drugs, whether that be whatever it might be, we show these real desires in a certain way that shows we're not trying to hide them, so that when we do talk about things that are spiritually sound and sit in that, I think it sits in a reality that makes it all feel real, makes it all feel like it's not preachy, like it's kind of coming from a grounded place. And so for me, that was the approach that I wanted to take, the thing that I wanted to have, that I felt I hadn't seen.
I think, I wanted to start by saying, we watched the show, and to be honest, real talk, right?
Yeah,
we watched the first episode, and we were like, I don't know if we can watch the rest of it, so we kind of paused, and then Sharif watched the whole thing, and he said, it's really good, the first part is really shocking.
Sure.
But then,
and I think that's the right way to do it, because I do think it's a family show, but I think that everyone in the family should watch it separately.
And because we have people, and we have our kids are in two generations, so we've got a 30-year-old and we've got a 14-year-old, so it's totally different. But when we watched it again in preparation for this talk, looking back on it, it was really brilliant, because I think that we were saying most shows kind of start and ramp you up and shock you at the end, and this one sort of shocks you in the beginning and then pulls you in. And I think that the way that especially in this community, one of the big issues that certainly we talk about here is hypocrisy. And I think that the show is very powerful in presenting hypocrisy in a very interesting and entertaining way that makes you think. And it's not necessarily, I know you've gotten a lot of criticism about, it's you're not representative, when you're doing this show. Mm-hmm. But I think that art is really intended to make people think, and for Muslims particularly, I feel like our priority is to humanize, and that you've done an amazing job in presenting characters that don't fall into the good Muslim, bad Muslim trope, but it's there's no one that's all good and no one that's all bad, but everybody's kind of struggling, and that I think is a really beautiful human experience. So but I don't need to. So I just wanted to say, I think that if nothing else, I know it sparked a lot of conversations in the community, and I think that in itself is extremely valuable, because most people don't want to talk about these kinds of things. And the last thing that was sort of, when I was kind of getting over the shock of, oh my God, how could he have done this? Sharif, actually, who's very much into art and all of that, was saying, listen, you can't really make a show that's very nuanced and very sort of quiet. You kind of have to shock people, otherwise people are going to miss it. And I think I'm sure that you've gotten a lot of reaction. I'd love to know kind of how, maybe with some of the blowback that you got that you weren't expecting, or just kind of the things that.
There's nothing that's been said that I wasn't expecting. I mean, there was scenes in the first episode that I was shooting them, and I was like, man, I can't believe we're gonna actually show this to people. There's a constant feeling of guilt and anxiety, and while you're making it, because that's the whole point of the show. It's not a factual play-by-play of my life. Certainly things are dramatized, but the emotions are totally that's how I feel. I feel very torn. But even there's something even to the filmmaking process that's interesting. You only make one episode up top, and then you find out if you're going to get to make all 10. Mm-hmm. So you got to put it all out on the table, that first one too, because it's going to be watched by a bunch of people, and there's a difference between selling out in order to get a show, and a difference between taking a risk. And I really thought about that with every scene and with everything, and I had my lines as to what it was that I knew I couldn't cross, and the rule for the first episode was the same rule for all 10. It'll be the same rule for all the episodes we make, which was that I didn't want to make fun of the religion. That's not what I feel. It's not what we need. It's not we can't be critical in how it's being practiced, but that's not my job. That's not what I want to do. I want to be introspective, and so I wanted to put out scenes and make things. And we talked about this a lot. And you know, my creators who I made things with pushed me to think about things in certain ways that I was like, nah, man, I couldn't do that. And then you think about it, and there's a lot of things that I got pushed to that I never did, and then the things that really made sense, I was like, yeah, this feels right. This feels right for the story. And so, yeah, I think that is very much the approach. It's like starting that way, and then, you know, the story gets to unfold. And we only got to make 10, you know, so now we get to make more, and then it gets to unfold even more. Yeah.
I don't want to dominate. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to. I want to focus a little bit on the issue of vulnerability, because I think the Muslim community in the West, we are well accustomed to the idea of a scholar. A scholar often can steer away from personal vulnerabilities. A scholar often hides behind and negotiates what is personal through objectified mediums. And the objectified mediums is data, historical data, philosophical data, theoretical data, hermeneutics, interpretation. You negotiate yourself through the text of the Quran, through the text of the Sunnah, through it. But an artist it doesn't have that line of defense. I mean, in many ways, it's like you are. It's like the what your stand-up is called feelings. I mean, and that medium of presentation seems to me very challenging. I mean, every criticism can become very personal, and you don't have a defensive line like the Quran or Sunnah or the opinions of scholars. And how do you, I mean, a lot of times I wonder, how do you manage to keep a comedic sense when you live with these vulnerabilities and you're very young? I mean, how do you maintain the artistic flair, the creative impulse? And does the blowback threaten your creative impulse?
Yeah, I mean, it's very new for me to have, you know, I started, you know, doing stuff in comedy 10 years ago, and relatively, it's the only thing I've done, and I, you know, was very blessed to, like, quickly be able to make a living off of it, and, you know, but I was never, like, public, so it hasn't really gone public in any way until, you know, this year. I released, you know, the show, and then 2 months after, the stand-up, which was after I'd been doing, you know, stand-up for probably 8 years worth of stuff, whittled down to an hour. And I think, especially with the show, but also with the stand-up, I pretty much, I knew what was going to happen. Like, I know the community, I'm part of the community, I care about the communities, you know, I'm only part of one of them, which is a very important thing to keep in mind with the types of blowback, because it really is, this is a story about an Arab family, which is going to be really distinct from a lot of other Muslim experiences. So it gets billed as this thing that could be a monolith for everyone, and it's really not. And so in terms of feeling that stuff, I mean, for me, I've always felt small doses of it on stage, because you go on stage, and if you're talking about vulnerability, you go on stage with like an idea and you say it, and then it either goes or it doesn't go, and so you're feeling like real-time reaction, and you're feeling that from the crowd, you're feeling that from people, but then it's really like scaled, you know, and then it's like everyone's watching it, and you know, it's on TV, it's being like pirated in the Middle East, and people are watching it there, and so I mean that stuff, in terms of how it's affected the writing going forward, I'm really like lucky to have people around me who are very thoughtful and kind of being like, hey, you know, because there's been a lot of stuff. There's been like, whether it be videos of people really upset about it, or articles, or any of those things. Kind of people who are close to me who are really good at looking at it and being like, oh, this person made a couple good points. Like, these are some things we can think about as if we're making it or whatever. And so that stuff's really good, because I think it's a conversation. In the same way that when I would go in front of an audience and say something for stand-up, I'm waiting to not always hear a laugh, but you hear like a certain level of attentiveness. There's a certain silence, there's a certain reaction, there's a certain something. And so you're looking for that. And it's the same with the show. So there's validity to what people are saying on a level. But then a lot of it is actually just people reacting to what the show is designed to do, which is touch on the things that we don't normally talk about. So it's like, a lot of it's like, man, all these things are happening, you're not talking about anything political, you're not talking about this, you're not talking about that. I'm like, well, yeah, because that's what we all do. We just sit around and we talk about politics and we don't talk about anything personal. And so, like, I don't want to talk about anything political, because we're already doing it. And the news, all the news talks about is the Muslim ban and the way people are being treated and this and that. So if I make a comedy show that's about the first Arab Muslim family, and I'm talking about the Muslim ban for 3 episodes, then people think, well, that really is all these people talk about. That really is all there is to them, you know? So for me, making this show, I actually make this show for the community, because we talk a lot about sex, and that's the thing that we don't talk about as a community. And so for me, it's my job to, I almost feel like this character of Ramy and this family and these people are built to be criticized. They're built to feel these things about, because it helps you talk about what's actually happening. Because you're like, man, that guy Ramy, and you can kind of go on a tirade, and then there's like 4 people in the room who are like, yeah, I mean, I kind of do the same thing, but I'm not gonna say anything. Like, or there's people who are like, I don't, but it becomes a reference point to talk about a thing we're not talking about. And so that to me is the goal of it. It's kind of like, here are all these thoughts, here are all these ideas. It's like when someone donates their body after they die or something, and they're like, hey, do what you want with whatever's there. It's kind of like that. It's like, hey, here's this family, here's this story, pick at it, you know, and talk about it, and make something that you think does what that doesn't do, or laugh at it, or like it, or have a conversation with your family that you haven't had.
There's always a tension, I think, with any artist, whether you know, an artist starts out hoping for success, just to get somewhere. But then ultimately, I think every artist has to wrestle with the issue of responsibility and representation. And I mean, there's a lot to say about how the show or the stand-up comedy sort of balances responsibility and representation. And I know that we've talked a bit about this, the two of us, but I want everyone to hear your thoughts about this. I mean, how not too many Muslims are represented in the media.
Yeah.
Right, and especially in the forum that you work in.
Yeah.
And the representations of Muslims are so typically stereotypical and negative that you know, whether they're escaping from their religion or embracing it fanatically and criminally, psychotically. So you're coming in and you're negotiating this space that is very. But I think the natural inclination for Muslims, because there's such, their representation in this media is so minimal, is to look at you and say, well, what example are you setting for other Muslims?
Yeah.
And future Muslims?
Yeah.
And how do you, on the one hand, you have to do a show that speaks to the American public, because the Muslim audience is not going to get you, just the Muslim audience is not going to get you away. You have to hit common grounds. But on the other hand, there is an implicit moral responsibility to, because you're pioneering, to represent well. And I'm, you know, how do you negotiate this, and what do you think is the future of Muslim representation in this media? If someone would tell you what type of if a Muslim comes to you and say, you know, I'm going to go into this industry, and I'm going to have to struggle and wrestle with this issue of representation and responsibility, what advice would you give them?
Well, and there's a moral responsibility if you're pious, because there are plenty of Muslims that don't take that responsibility.
Right. Yeah. What do you make if you actually care?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's two styles of making something where it's like this. There's the Muslim filter that helps me sell the show, you know, or you can be someone. And there's a lot of people who are like, well, oh, cool, my dad's Muslim, and oh, cool, I'll put that in my bio.
Right.
And then there's like, no, I actually believe in this. Like, I actually believe that when this is all gone, I have to answer for what I've done while I'm here.
Right.
I think about that a lot. And yeah, I don't have like a defined answer. I don't know, I'm just doing my best. I don't know, like I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing, and sometimes I'm like, man, am I gonna regret this in 20 years? And I don't know. I do think the reason why I won't regret it is or why I won't fully regret it, there'll be, I'm sure I already have regrets on the first season. There are certain things where I'm like, oh, okay, I could have. And they're not all like moral. Some of them I'm like, the lighting could have been better. But you know, you're kind of always wrestling with it. And I think that's the whole point. I think like displaying the wrestling match is the thing that I could be most beneficial in doing. Representing Muslims is very difficult. Like even amongst ourselves, we don't know who we are or what we want to be. We don't even fast on the same day. Like it's crazy. Like we can't agree, and it's literally like we can't agree on things. So that's okay, and I'm not even judging that. I just think that what I have to do is, you know, I call the show Ramy because it's about this guy. This guy is a lot like me at certain points in my life. This family is a lot like a lot of people that I know. They're not really my family. I wanted to give my family at least a break so they wouldn't feel it was directly them, you know. Because they're not. My family's much more open and communicative than the one on the show. I wanted to trap a guy. I wanted to give him a family that's a little more closed off, and I wanted to put him in a situation and see what he does. And I think that in terms of how this, I think about it, I mean, in terms of like how does this affect kids who watch it at some point, whenever it is that they watch it. And all I can say is we're surrounded by, I started watching porn when I was 11. Like, I actually watched porn more because I didn't want to have sex, because I wanted to be a good Muslim. And so in my head I was like, oh yeah, this is what God wants. Like I don't even, like, that's insane. God wants, like that's the level of confusion. Yeah, at 11 till whenever. So we're already surrounded by all these things. So to have a character who goes through all this stuff, but actually seems like he feels most comfortable when he's praying, or like has more comfort in like a hadra saying Allah than when he's like doing anything else. That's those are the pieces that I think someone who relates to this character is going to gravitate towards. And then people who think everything this character does is inhuman and terrible and a sin and whatever, well, they probably don't watch that much TV anyway. And if they do, then why are you so critical about this and you watch Game of Thrones where everyone's like having sex with their sister and a dragon and like whatever? Like, you know, so that those are the now I get the sensitivity of we don't have much, so everyone wants it to be everything for them and everyone wants it to be a certain way, but I think we can kind of like liberate ourselves from this idea that there's only going to be this show, you know, that like it's almost like this show is like it's like you want a lot from a president because there can only be one.
Right.
Yeah.
and so you're like so frustrated with the guy because you're like, that's the only one and he makes all the choice. Man, there are like so many ways to get a story out there.
What I mean, this is sort of admittedly it's a silly question, but there are so many Muslims that dream of success, but can't get a foot in and don't know. I am sure, I mean, although we've never talked about this, but I am sure that you get a lot of Muslims writing you saying, how can we get into the business? What have you, I mean, I'm sure that you've thought about what elements have contributed to your success and your ability to get a foot in. And is this sunnah forming for other Muslims? I mean, is it something that other Muslims can hope to imitate and get somewhere from?
You know, it's really tricky because
And I'll explain after you answer. I'll tell you why I'm asking this question, because I have something very specific in mind.
yeah, I mean, I think like everyone I know has such a different path. You know, when I'm in, there's other people I know who've gotten shows, and I look at how they did it and how I did it, and you couldn't. There's a couple of very key common things, and then everything else is really different. And I would say that the number one thing was just putting in the work. I mean, I think it was really obsessively all I ever did, between writing something or video editing or doing stand-up or doing whatever. It's just constantly, every night, figuring out how to do it and figuring out how to get it up. And that's something not everyone has access to, so everyone kind of has to find different ways into doing it.
When did you know that you wanted to be a comedian?
I was very drawn to it. It was almost like it was a very stressful relationship with it, because I never thought it could be a reality, you know, because we obviously didn't have like reference points like we talk about. There's no reference points to like Arabs doing stuff and Muslims doing stuff in a certain way, and so I always felt like it was going to end at some point. And actually, this is,
You're going to end up going to law school.
going to law school. Yeah, it's really funny because it's like it was almost like the pressure from my parents kind of being like, look, that can't be your real thing. You know, they were like, it could be a hobby, it can't be your real thing. And there was almost something about that pressure that made me work really hard at it, because I was like, well, I can only do this until I go to law school, so I'm going to try and do as much of it as possible. I sometimes think if my parents were like, yeah, be an artist, I would just be like dead. Like I don't know what I would do. Like I would just be like, oh cool, I could just be an artist, and then I would just like, you know, not really work as hard as I did. I was kind of running against this clock of like, I don't have time, so I need to do as much. And then when I realized I could do it, I still got addicted to that clock of I don't have time, because it became really real for me, you know, just on a regular life level. It was like, I could die, like, you know, like anyone can, you know, at any moment. And so really kind of like finding a way to have that healthy balance between justified pressure, you know, like pressure to be your potential, you know. And for me, it was trying to reach that through doing this, because this was just my natural gravitation. And I think there's a lot of artists out there who feel that, who feel like I should be writing, I should be performing, I should be making, and they know it's the thing they should do, and then they're pulled towards the thing they should do. And so the only real advice that I can give is to find a way to structure your life where you can honestly do the thing you actually should be doing, and apply the same pressure that you would if you were going to med school, apply the same pressure that you would if you were doing anything else. And then you just really have to pray. I mean, because I couldn't be in Hollywood if I wasn't Muslim, not because it's the thing I talk about, but because you need a lot of faith. You need a lot of faith, and you need to believe in something, and you can't believe in a production company, you know, because they're not, they don't care.
You know, one of the things, you don't strike me as an angry person. A lot of, especially when it comes to comedy, a lot of Muslims, their work is angry. Whether it's angry at the religion or angry at the other. Especially I saw this in your stand-up comedy, you're very understated and human. Your comedy sort of takes concentration and you build things up. So there's no sense of outrage and indignation, which made me wonder, do you think, and I know this is a tough question, but that's why you talk to...
That's why you're here.
Yeah, you talk to pastors, I guess. Do you think the fact that you don't have a sense of explicit outrage made it easier for the industry to accept you and embrace you? I mean, if you had a sense of racial outrage, ethnic outrage, cultural outrage that you wear on your sleeve, would you have met with resistance?
It all depends on the era. Because if you look at Hollywood, we're going from not that long ago, hey, you should change your name to something that sounds more white, to now, the harder your name is to spell, the better it is. Like, just please be as far away from white. Yeah, that's the window we're in right now, as of September 2019. And I think if you look at a lot of work, it actually is racially angry, and it is very against white people. So I don't know if that's true. I think if someone is funny enough and is Muslim, not that you said that's the truth, you asked the question, but I think if someone's funny enough and is Muslim and does have a sense of anger, or a sense of, you know, I feel this thing was unjust, if they figured out a way to make that interesting, I think it would be very well received, actually. I mean, one of the most popular characters on my show is very angry and very sexist, anti-Semitic, racist, and oh my God! And the head of the network told me it's his favorite TV character that ever happened.
Yeah.
So it's and he says these things that are crazy, you know, that half a Muslim audience nods and says that's our hero. So I mean, I think that if you could, you can be anything if you can embrace it. And that's why, for me, it's really about just being the thing you're supposed to be, that you're supposed to do. So a lot of the criticism even that comes towards the show is really just me not being a different thing. It's not even like, it's more of like a dislike for the type of character, or a dislike for the lack of scope. But I actually think the lack of scope is a pro, because you want to be focused. You want to be focused on a thing. You don't want to feel like you're trying to do everything. Because when somebody's trying to do everything, it's really tough to watch. It feels insane. But also, you want people who have a more specific experience than you to make their own thing, because I want to watch that. There are certain things that I didn't cover on my show. They're interesting to me, but I don't know enough about them, so why would I do that?
Absolutely. And you know, on this point, it's probably a good time to share like some of the questions that we received.
Yeah.
You know, definitely about the role of women.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you get a lot of criticism about that. Because you know, it's like. People have said this is not representative of, you know, women I know or experiences that I know, or that, you know, the only positive person that was presented was my cousin or your cousin. You know? And I think, like, you know, again, I think it's such a priority to show women as, you know, human, or Muslims as human. I noticed that there weren't any, like, hijabis that were sort of explicit, and I thought that was sort of smart, because when you're dealing with an audience that might associate a lot of negativity with that hijab. You know, I mean, you see women in hijab, and even like the woman who, like, you know, who you go home with and she's in the hijab and then she comes back and you say, oh my God, I forgot to put it back on. But, you know, it's like a lot of the things that you do with the women in the show, like, I think by design, need to, like, kind of, you have to go way out there so you can talk about it, right? So, but I would love to know more about kind of what your thought was about women and the role and how you portray them.
Well, I think just on first and foremost, I run the show, and so I'm a guy, and so what ends up happening is there's a level of nuance that I bring to my experience as a guy that I have worked on stage for, you know, between making things whatever for the last decade. So that stuff's all going to feel really full. It's just going to feel really full because it's the place I write from. And first season I hired, I think, three women writers. 2 are Muslim. This season again, three. But you know, so the people are there. You know what I mean? It's not like we're sitting and just, you know, drawing a caricature and an assumption. Like, we're talking. You know, like, we're talking about it. But it's never gonna feel as balanced all the time, just by nature of that I am the lead of it, and so there's gonna be a disparity. That being said, yeah, it can get better. Like, there's things that we did there that we're looking at a character whose problem is, on a level, is really his sexual desire. To me, it's the most human desire. I get it the most because it's this thing I've struggled with understanding between my faith and. But I also think it's healthier to talk about to me than drugs or violence. And I feel like if my character was doing cocaine, people would be like, oh, cool. They'd be like, oh, yeah. Because, like, you know, maybe a lot of Muslims, like, don't deal with it. Some do, but, like, it'll feel further away, and it would be kind of comfortable. It'd be like, yeah, he's a cokehead. You know, it's just, like, it's easier. It's easier to, like, put it in a category, you know. But what he deals with is sex. And so, yeah, there's a fine balance to deal with it there. Because, so we do an episode about my sister, and her episode has to do with sex as well. And so then it becomes kind of, some of the conversation has been like, all the women in the show are dealing in some sort of context of sex. And I get it. It's 10 episodes. Right. It's the problem of the main character. Right. And it's also the thing we chose to focus on when we focused with the women. But I guarantee you what would have happened if I didn't do sex storylines with them. It'd be like, why is sex only for men? Yeah. Why are we not talking about Muslim women in sex? Why are we talking about how hard it is for them? How come he gets to go do that? So there's always going to be like a thing that becomes an issue. And I think in terms of those characters, Arab women, I've heard from a lot of Arab women who love the characters that are portrayed, and they're like, I feel like this is a thing that I really connect to. And then I've heard from women who are Muslim, who are an Arab, who are like, no, that's not me, that's not, you know, whatever. But just to wrap up, like, on that question, there's just a lot more nuance that we want to do and need to do, and there's so many things. Again, you're making you only have 10 episodes. It's like not even 5 hours.
I'm gonna just following up on this issue of sex and the women characters.
Yeah.
I was really struck by the episode of the sister. And I don't know, you know, how the themes developed and were decided on. But one of the things that I teach a class called Muslims, Race, and Law, and we talk about all types of. And one of the things that emerged through this class is this. It's not entirely new because it comes from the days of colonialism and Orientalism. Muslim women as a fetish, as a sexual fetish, but with the age of social electronics and what do you call it? Social media. Muslim women as a sexual fetish became a category in pornography. Yeah. I mean, it's like black women or Asian women, but there is no fetish in pornography. Jewish women, for instance. Yeah. So it's or Christian women. No, it's
women in hijab.
It's women in hijab, and so I was.
How do you know that there aren't those categories?
Research.
Research.
You seem very confident. You seem very confident to know that. How come? Like, what site?
I know a lot of things.
Okay.
So I was blown away by how you raise this issue of the fetish in the sisters episode, and it is deeply ingrained with the history of colonialism, military domination, racism, a long history in the West interacting with the Muslim world, where women become sort of the battlefield. But none of these issues were discussed, and it was just we were confronted with this fetish, and it left the viewer to sit there and, you know, go nuts reflecting on the implications of this. Was this intentional? I mean, is this part of the art, of what art does? It's to sort of like needle you and let you go off on your own, which was very different from what scholarship does.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, for me, I wish I could say I thought of everything that you said when we were doing that. I wish I was like sitting in the writer's room being like, no, this is about colonialism, when he tries to grab her. But no, it on a level, I'm aware of those things. You know, I read about them and went to college for 2 years. It was a really beautiful stint. But I'm not, you know, for the reason I called my stand-up special Feelings was because that's my feeling as to like what it is you should be creating. It should all be emotionally based. It's cool if the scholarship and the facts add up to it, but that's not my job. So what would be worse is if I kind of like pretended to kind of know a book and then like act like I know what I'm talking about. I would rather be a certain type of wrong, which is, well, maybe the facts don't all add up, but at least the feelings and the emotions are true. And so when we really zoned in on a storyline like that, it was really like trying to dig into talking to women in our room, but also talking to a lot of women in my life. You know, were the moments where you felt the weirdest and the most cornered and oddest and most violated and really, you know, questioning this idea of whether, you know, I think America equates sexual freedom with freedom, you know, and that's, it's almost like if you're sexually free, then you're free. And I think with as much as the show deals with sex, it becomes really clear that anytime you kind of chase that, you hit a certain wall. Because it's not actually the freedom that we're looking for. We're looking for a deeper understanding of ourselves. And so when we crafted that episode for her, it was about looking at this dichotomy of, well, the character of Ramy gets to run around and do whatever he wants, and the character of Dina doesn't. So she should, you know, we want to see her fight to basically get the freedom that Ramy has. But on the other end of that, it can't be like, oh, awesome, this is a great life. Because it's actually not for Ramy either. Like, Ramy is kind of sitting in a lot of guilt and self-doubt and a lack of intimacy, actually, for the amount of intimate behavior that he's participating in. But we wanted to kind of craft a more specific wall for her to hit, you know, and that felt like one that a lot of women who I know have dealt with.
And again, you know, through your show, you needled the viewer in a variety of ways. You provoked us as viewers in a variety of ways. So now I'm needling you back.
Yeah.
Okay?
Please.
So I noticed that the mother and the sister, their episodes, we don't actually know how they feel about Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, was that intentional or not?
It was, no, it wasn't. It was something that when I looked back, I feel like we have a little bit more of an understanding about how the mom feels about it through just the way she treats her kids, and she kind of wants marriage for them and she wants certain things, but that's cultural. And it's something that we're, you know, I mean, we're almost done writing the second season now, so it does answer some of those things. But no, we didn't get into it. And I think part of the reason why is a little bit of the style of the show. Stylistically, they're very focused episodes. I mean, if you watch them, you'll see there's always kind of one problem, and then we just follow it. And it's one character, and then we follow it. We don't do A story, B story, C story. So it kind of was a shortcoming, to be honest. It was just kind of one of those things where when I went back and I watched 1 through 10, among a couple of things, like some of the lighting, there was that was a thing where I was like, oh yeah, that we didn't get that across in an effective way, in a nuanced way. Yeah.
One of the most uncomfortable parts for me was the episode about the mother.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to think of our mothers in. I mean, this woman, she's obviously smart. She's obvious. Her kids are grown. Her husband, like a lot of Egyptian husbands in the United States, is very interested in the musalsalat, you know, on TV, and sort of takes his wife for granted.
Yeah.
And yet we don't want to think of our mothers as having sexual desires and wanting intimacy outside the home. And so I couldn't help when I was watching this. and especially the part where she puts like the makeup on and
Yeah, it's
looks,
horrifying. Yeah.
very. But
Yeah.
then it turns out that the French speaking dude. I intentionally, as a sheikh, say dude to sound cool.
Yeah.
That's my participation.
Diffuses all the
in
scholarship.
Yeah. I try.
Even when you're doing like Islam stuff, like
Especially
like in the middle of like
yeah,
talking about
yeah.
hadith, you're like the
I
dude
go
saw
in,
that
I
was
even, I just put it in to confuse people. So you're not the only one confusing people, just so you know. So, the French-speaking dude then, it turns out to be interested in his wife and
His own
so,
wife.
in his own wife,
Yeah.
So, I couldn't help but think, one is, how did your mother react to this episode? And how did mothers that you know in your life react to that episode? Because it just stayed with me, and I have to tell you that a lot of the episodes that I watch, right after I would watch your episode, I would need to calm down by reading Quran.
Yeah.
And so I would do 2 rak'ahs and then read Quran and then sit there and just plead with Allah to give me peace and tranquility.
So you're saying my show brought you closer to
Yes,
Allah?
absolutely. Your show
That's
made me
beautiful.
worship much more.
I mean, we're done, right? It's amazing.
So but how did your mother react, and where? Again, how do you negotiate this issue where you decide, okay, I'm going to go to the most uncomfortable thing, the sexuality of mothers.
Yeah. It in terms of how my mom reacted to it, she was like, moms have an amazing way of just skipping over things and kind of like they pick what they want to focus on, and then the rest is kind of, that's being a mom. Being a mom is mastering this ability to ignore things that would bother you about your kids, because your kids are gonna go out and live these full 3D lives that have nothing to do with you, and they're living in times that are different from yours. So that's like the mom's Jedi master trick of being able to let go. And so she was watching the episode, and she called me. She said it was her favorite one. And she was like, oh my god, I love this part, I love this part, I love this part. The part with the guy in it, I didn't like that part. But the other part, and like she just like kind of like it didn't even mean it. Like she just kind of skipped over it. And these things, it's really, these TV episodes, these things that we make, these aren't like, sometimes I think, I don't know what it's like in music. I'm not in music, but I know a lot of people spend a really long time on an album. TV's like, yo, it's coming out April 19th. But that's it. You gotta make 10. They gotta be ready. And I don't say that as anything other than, you're kind of going through it, and it ties a little bit to your question about exploring the how they feel about faith and stuff. Certain things kind of like slip through, or whatever it might be. But what I really was very happy about with that episode with the mom was that it did touch something that was uncomfortable. It's something that I think a lot of people relate to, and it also showed kind of like, this was something I did not intend in the writing, but when I look back on it, it showed kind of two sides of a coin, where 2 episodes earlier, I have this experience with someone who is married, and then 2 episodes later, you actually see it from the married person's perspective. Now, it doesn't go through in any level like that. It's probably not even serious, but you see just the seed of it, and you kind of see the seed of what these feelings look like. And those feelings are not unique to our communities. They're not unique to, these are feelings that sit in any relationship, in any marriage, in any family. And that episode in particular, people really responded to in a way, and I know a lot of people said it reminded them of their mothers. I know a lot of people who said their mothers told them to watch it. I know a lot of that. And, no, it was an episode that really resonated with most of the episodes that really resonated with people were the ones that I wasn't in, and you know.
It's very kind of you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the episode with the married woman. That's the episode that.
Yeah, we were watching and we were like, no, don't.
Yeah.
I have to say
that's the one.
That's the episode that caused me the most salah and dua. I was intensely in dua after that episode for a long time.
You know, I didn't let my parents see the show until like 3 days before it came out. I sent it to them because I was like, I wanted them to be able to tell their friends and stuff, like, you know, he didn't tell us anything and he, you know, we couldn't stop him, you know. Just like that, I felt like that was the best like adab I could have. Other than being like full like alil adab like outside of that, like I was like, if I'm gonna do that, like at least I can have some sort of respect for them and keep them in the dark. And so I really wrote them a very long letter, kind of explaining to them why I felt like I wanted to do this, why I felt like I had to do this, and kind of gave them the total full like, look, you can please like just you don't have to like this, like it's okay. I'm not putting a burden on you to like accept this. You know, whatever you feel, you feel. And so I said to them, I basically made it sound like I had just produced porn. And so they were very scared. And then my dad was watching, and he'd watch things, and he'd be like, it was a little weird, and okay, whatever. And he's like, hey, this is fine. I don't know why you thought I'd have a problem. And then he called me after that episode, and he was like, why did you do this? Like, what are you doing? Like, why is this? And I was just like, just keep watching.
Yeah.
You'll understand why we wanted to do that, and you know, yeah.
No, it was. I mean, I like that episode in particular. I really liked it, you know, when we got over the shock. Like this is where I found a lot of brilliance coming in. Like when you wake up in the morning and you check your phone, you're watching your Facebook, you know, because the night before your friend had asked you to pray for his mom, right?
Yeah.
And so then the little boy comes in, the little boy who the mother you just affair with, right?
Yeah.
And says, are you a bad man?
Yeah.
And at the same time you look at the Facebook and you notice that the prayer you did was not answered because the mom died. And, you know, like to me that was just brilliant because it's like you're telling people without telling them outright, look, God didn't answer my prayer because obviously I'm not being a moral person. And that God is watching and God is engaged in your life and that there is a relationship there. And, you know, and so those kinds of things that...
I mean, it's really interesting but that's why I guess part of what art is, because it's like the way Grace took the beginning of the scene where pray for you, my mom, and the last scene where the mom dies is that there's a moral lesson that if you screw up, God is not going to answer your prayer. I don't know if I took it that way at all, but and of course, I mean, it's I feel a sense of unfairness to ask an artist, what did you mean? Because I mean, perhaps that's a meaningless question in itself.
Well, it actually it's almost like that scene was exactly what I wanted to do with the show, which is I wanted to create the real feeling of what it feels like to believe and have guilt and wonder, which is that why that happened? Like, was my prayer not answered because I did the wrong thing? But it's not definitive.
Yeah.
I think you said it in a way that was kind of definitive because I don't know if that's why.
Right.
You know, but is it not? Like it's kind of sitting in this place where you're not sure, and you're trying to make sense of it, and that, you know, relationship you know, is very real to me, and so and yeah.
This is I mean, shifting a little bit, but one of the things that one of the things that, again, I don't know if this was intentional, not intentional. And again, you could enlighten me on. I don't know if your generation grew up with the clash of civilizations divide. The East will be East and West will be West, and because which used to be, well, I mean, it was extremely popular. It was the neocons throughout the war on Iraq and the invasion of Afghanistan. Has an enormous amount of influence in DC. it waned during the Obama years, but during the Trump years, the idea of the clash of civilizations but yet the thing when I watch Ramy, the show, is here are American Muslims are neither East nor West. I mean, and perhaps it's an implicit critique of the entire paradigm. Perhaps that paradigm, because also when you see Ramy going back to Egypt, well, Egyptians are neither East nor West. And is that? I mean, have you thought about that? Is that part of the trajectory of what you thought about, or is that just you express feelings and then academics analyze after the fact?
You know, I will say when I pitched the show, I did reference Huntington's Clash of Civilization.
Okay.
I did.
That's what you did.
I did, because what I was trying to say in the room was, this isn't about Trump. You know, I was very clear when I walked in. I was like, look, I know you're excited about this because of Trump, and now you know Hollywood gets to be good, you know, and make good by making a show like this. But I was like, this is an idea that has existed for a very long time, and even if we want to talk about in a contemporary coining of it, Huntington was what, 92, 93?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, so this idea is already 25 years old.
Right.
Already, you know, and so this isn't about this election. This is a story that's timeless. This is a show that if you make it and we make it the way that I want to make it, people will be able to watch it for 10, 15 years, because we're not sitting talking about cell phones, we're not sitting talking about we're talking about something internal, but we're also talking about framing it in some larger ideas that are a little bit east-west. But I think what you realize is when you try and go into it with that framing, you do kind of arrive at what you just said, which is, well, not really. Like, we're not really either. And even if you go there, that is obviously the point that we make in that episode. And the shocking thing to me when I go to Egypt and you're in the cool part of Cairo and all the menus are in English. And they say, well, if you don't know English, then like you're not our clientele. You know, it's very it's a weird time.
I mean, it's part of globalization, and I mean, there are people who try to deny sort of the metropolitan culture, the reality of metropolitanism, and the fact that more and more urban centers seem to all be the same, whether we like it or not. But this, I mean, it brings me to the sensitive issue of race, which the show touches upon, but doesn't. One of the most controversial issues in the Muslim community is race. Are we legally? It's a very controversial issue whether we're white. And when we say we, I mean Muslim descendants of immigrants or immigrants. So Middle Eastern, Indo-Pacs, Indonesians, Malaysians, I mean all the places where, and the tension is, it seems like a lot of immigrant Muslims want to be white, but culturally and sociologically they're not white, and they can never be white. And growing up in your experience, have you ever felt white? Do you think of yourself as white? How do you feel about the institution of whiteness itself?
Yeah, I didn't know. It was hard to, right? Because it was like, I think I was like 11 when 9/11 happened, and I think like before that, still no, just because it was so clear that we were different. I mean, we spent every summer in Egypt, and you know, just all the specific rules that very quickly you kind of understand you're coming at it from a different angle. So no, I've never felt it, but I've also been very aware of the fact that I am white passing, which is its own thing, right? Because I would actually argue that even the earlier point you made about was it easier for me to sell a show because I was not angry? No, it might have been easier for me to sell a show because I'm white passing. That is, which is a different thing, and that's a reality,
Right.
you know. And internally though, and even in the way I'm received by people on an initial layer, if you don't know anything about me, then I'm sure I have privileges from that. Just on like an instant, like walking into a grocery shop kind of level. But I don't really think much more beyond that.
In growing up in New Jersey, have you had experiences with race? Was it part of your consciousness? I mean, I've wondered. I mean, it's sort of a bit of a. If someone says race is absent from your show, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, also like, minus, you know. I mean, we talk about it a bit. It's interesting because it's like, I could almost say politics is kind of absent on a level too. Not that race and politics are the same,
Right.
but I think there's a lot of things that you could say they're absent from your show, you know, on a level. I mean, there's a bit of a political framing, obviously, of the 9/11 episode, but it's so not political, you know, and I mean, there's parts where it is, but
All of that is intentional, or
it's kind of an order of operations, you know. I mean, it's going to be, so our second season that we're making now, with and Mahershala Ali's in it. He's a big part of it, and so he's in like 6 episodes, and so race is very much going to be present, and it actually was. I don't want to say the storyline. There was a very race-conscious storyline for an episode in the first season that we pulled at the time because I didn't feel like we were going to execute it properly, and so I kind of was like, you kind of do assessment of what you're going to get from an audience, and I was more happy to say we didn't talk about race than to talk about it the way that episode was written at the time. And so that episode just got put to the side, became a rewrite, and then this is like totally Allah. I have like the guy who just won the Oscar calls me and says, "Hey, can I be in your show?" and now we get to do that storyline in a very real way that is a lot more exciting. So yeah, but I will say even the dynamics of what the mosque looks like mosques that I went to. In New Jersey, mosque, you go to the Arab mosque, you go to the Turkish mosque, you go to the Uzbek mosque. You don't. It's. I remember when I came to LA, it was like a Malcolm Goes to Mecca, where I was like, whoa, I couldn't. But like, it was way more diverse than what I saw in New Jersey. New Jersey is very, very neighborhoody and very racially divided mosques. Not that anyone would have a problem if someone else went, but just everyone kind of sticks to where they have their people.
Interesting.
And class too.
Yeah, class too, for sure.
There's a scene where you have the Dominican who says "Salam alaikum" to you, right?
Yeah.
And initially, when that fellow says "Salam alaikum," I thought to myself, "Oh, great! He's going to interact with someone who's clearly not white," and I was sort of happy about that.
Yeah.
And then your friend comes and says, "That's FBI."
Yeah.
And don't talk to this guy. And you of course leave us hanging whether this guy is actually FBI. I mean, is your friend racist, or in fact there is? And it made me naturally think about, well, what is the reality of that? I mean, is there a trope for people that are suspected of working for the FBI? In fact, do they tend to be Dominican? I mean, yeah.
Wow. You know, is it so? The question of is it racist or is that guy FBI? The answer is it could be both.
Right.
You know, and I think that
You're not gonna resolve any.
no, not yet.
Yeah.
I mean, Arabs are
Yes.
one of the most racist groups of people I've ever dealt with. Is the truth. I mean, it's alive and well, and it's not good, and we deal with it. You know, we deal with it in the episode when we go to Egypt, and my cousin who just kind of like is freewheeling saying the N-word, and you know, we got like a lot of reactions from that. A lot of people who really loved we called it out. A lot of people who were like, wait, he says it and then Ramy says nothing. What is going on with that? And that's ridiculous. And yeah, that's what happens in real life. Friends say something, people say something, and maybe you say a little something, which my character does. He's like, dude, you can't say that. And then they blow over it, and then you kind of just keep going, and that's what happens. And that's not, you know.
It's fascinating because it's like Ramy is not an angry person. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I had in my own life an experience in Egypt where someone said the N-word. We were actually at his home, and he said the N-word, and I lost it. I got very mad, and I stormed out. Kept from Malta, and I stormed out. I wouldn't go back to the apartment.
Yeah.
And I just kept reflecting, you know, am I screwed up, or is Ramy screwed up?
I mean, if you're ever asking that question, the answer is Ramy screwed up. That's like that is the you know, that is the goal for sure. If there is a goal of the show, it's that Ramy is screwed up, and I think he is so desperate to kind of have people feel comfortable and kind of like, you know, he's so undecided on so many things, and it's not the kind of thing that like he takes a little bit of a stance on it. He does, like,
yeah.
And he unequivocally thinks it's wrong and like wants it to stop,
that's
but also
cool.
he doesn't like it does kind of pass, and I think it and it feels a little bit unresolved, which I think is kind of the truth. Is if I shot the scene where my character acted like you did, it's not a good scene. It's kind of like, oh, a guy gets really upset and he's like, you can't say that, don't be racist, alright? I can't be your friend if you're gonna say that, and then he kind of walks out and you're just kind of like, well, oh, okay. Like, it doesn't feel, it's not real, it's not really solved, it's not, it doesn't do anything. Or if I gave him, like, if I sat him down and we spent 9 minutes talking about the history of it, and then at the end he was like, man, I'll never say it again, and then like we hugged, then it's like, oh man, I don't know, I can't. I honestly don't even think the camera would record. I think it would shut down. I think the camera would have like completely shut down, and the tech people would have been like, we don't know what's going on with the camera. No, the camera has integrity. Like, cause we can't shoot that scene because it's so like violently boring. Like that would be the most violent, messed up scene on the show. Is if I gave him a lecture and then we like hugged and he was like, I'll never do it again, man. Because it's like, you know that character, you know that guy, he's gonna do it again. He probably said it when he got back into the party.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating because
This is what I live with.
Yeah. But for real life, that's amazing. This is like an amazing person.
No,
You know what I mean?
but and part of it is that I'm saying, I mean, credit to you that I started understanding why I'm a boring human being.
No one knows though, because you say dude so much.
I tried to cover it with a thing, but I mean, it does beg. Okay, so here from this the stance of I came to the U.S. Went to college in the United States. When I came to the United States, I was 19 years old, alone. I didn't have my family with me. But as someone who grew up with halal and haram drilled into the consciousness, into my consciousness, right? From a sheikh perspective, I want Sharia to prevail in every instance. These books that tell us what Allah wants, right? But at the same time, I recognize that that's not really my first question after I saw the first episode. Is I had a discussion with Sharif. You know, is this? Do American Muslims actually go through this stuff? You know, is the books of law? Could the books of law could be so irrelevant in the life of American Muslims? Is it? And of course, Sharif was saying, absolutely, this is reality, and you know, wake up and smell the garbage type thing. But it's not the narrative I want.
Yeah.
I want,
Yeah.
but I also understand that the narrative I want is not going to make art.
Yeah.
It will actually kill art. I mean, I imagine if you had a list of Sharia injunctions in your head every time you sat to produce art, I don't know what the heck you can make. But then we go back to the issue of responsibility.
Yeah.
So, what if someone tells you, you know, normatively, you just told Muslim kids that Sharia is relevant in your life, and you know, sinning is sinful. How do you deal with this type of?
Oh, but I don't think I did say that though.
Well,
I mean, I didn't say that. I mean, the character is very uncomfortable. Again, he doesn't reach the end of the episode and go, "I'm right." You know, like that. That's not. It's the guilt is consistent. So it's something he's going through, but there is not an attempt to change the rule. There's not an attempt to say this is the norm. There's a frustration with his own actions, and there's a questioning, and there's what he thinks is trying to be good, and there's that desire, but I think he's very clearly falling short, and I think that you know, so you're surrounded by all these books. You're someone who keeps reading.
Right.
You've read all these, and you still need to keep reading, right? So the truth is,
and I feel more ignorant than ever.
The
more I read,
the more you read. Like this stuff is it's so endless, right? So to try and make like a 30-minute show where he's right would be really difficult, because it's like you're never really going to be able to fully explain it. But to make a 30-minute episode where the character's clearly wrong and clearly flawed, but he's asking the right questions, and it does that needling that then leaves an open-endedness, because I think a couple of your questions to me were, well, this wasn't answered, this wasn't answered, this wasn't answered. My subliminal hope is that someone's like, oh, well, this made me think of some questions, maybe I should read the books, you know, and maybe I should go down this path. So instead of trying to put like what's in the books like into a thing, to me it's more interesting to like kind of show what's actually happening, but with the compass pointed towards the books. So that there's this desire to go that way, as opposed to this desire to erase, and this desire to be like, oh man, Islam and all that stuff, that's in the past. That's hundreds of years old, blah, 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 blah. Now we're here, we're upgraded, we can be white too. So that's the media that we're constantly seeing being made, is it's pointing the compass that way, of hey, you can leave that behind, get in the car, go on a road trip, new life. This show it's the book in one hand, and it's the, I guess, the condom in the other, but it's very torn, but it points towards this.
You know, what's really interesting to me is like, you know, you have the scholar on one end and the artist on the other, but you know, a lot of what we talk about here is about how Islam is about intuition, your fitra, what God gave you, it's part of you. And that, you know, like the professor has said, do I really need to read all of these books to affirm that, you know, what I know in my heart and in my intuition is sort of beautiful and humanistic, and, you know, what God gave me. And that's the approach you're taking too, sort of without the books. You know, you're really relying on sort of the intuition, because everything, with all the struggle and all the challenges, you're still kind of coming back to that core of what's in your soul. And you're finding that what really resonates with you is what is sort of that connection with God that you're seeking, and you're not really quite sure, like, okay, how does that materialize? I feel it, but how relevant should be to what I'm doing, but it's like you're sort of coming at the same thing, at the same thing from different places, which I think is really beautiful, because it's just kind of like, the divine can be, manifest and affirmed through so many different, vantage points, and kind of coming back to like figuring out what's your passion. And the other thing we really emphasize here is it's like part of being a faithful person is to know yourself and know why you were put on this earth, what your passion, your skills, what you're good at, and recognize that's part of the divine, your divine purpose, and then like, run with it. And so that it's just, to me, like, as an observer, it's just really, beautiful.
Yeah, I framed it in a form of a question, but I think part of what I really value in the show is precisely that it does point towards it does needle you towards a tradition. I mean, it doesn't, unlike a lot of angry Muslims who basically are in a state of outrage against the tradition, Ramy has an intuitive sense that the tradition remains relevant and important, and in fact, a lot of his problems is that he is struggling with failing that tradition. But I think it's important to make it explicit, because the temptation is there to watch the show and to say, oh, well, this tells us how to be American Muslims.
Sure.
And I don't, that's not what I get from the show at all. It's not setting a model for how to be, how American Islam should be.
No. Yeah, I mean, that's not the goal. It's a portrait of how it is for some people. But again, yeah, it's not, there's no conclusion reached of like, this is correct and this is, this is how it should be. And I think like, too, as the show matures and as we get to make it more, and I mean, first 10 episodes I ever made of anything, it's like striving for clarity on a couple of these things too. And again, when I look back on it, I'm like, this is by no means like perfect. You know what I mean? It's not, even when I like, I'm not even, I don't defend it so much as just explain it a little bit or some of the things, but the show can do a better job of it too, and kind of growing into it and kind of understanding its tone, and so that's what that's what I'm really excited about doing.
In growing up, have you had a lot of experiences with imams?
Not a ton, no. I mean, I think like there was like my Sunday school imam who was like the scariest person on earth to me, and then a little bit in college, but not until really the last 2 years have I like started to have like an intimate relationship with imam.
I mean, this is how do I put this? The culture of imams is a gold mine of comedy.
Yeah.
A gold mine.
Yeah.
If I had any comedic sense, I would have tapped into it. But
I think you're a better one for not having a comedic sense. I think when they do, they're all like imams. I don't like imams on Snapchat. I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable.
I mean, again, it struck me the absence that you didn't tap into a lot of the absurdities of imams in the show,
Yeah.
and I wasn't sure if this is because just it was a conscious choice to leave that out, or because you're writing the show as non-Muslims, or I wondered about that, and I didn't know how to feel about it. I mean, I didn't know whether to appreciate it or to say, God, what a missed opportunity.
Well, I think part of it, there's two things there. One is, I mean, okay, one's a small comment you made about writing with non-Muslims. Is I really the final word on every script is mine, and really a lot of the initial words on it too. I mean, I'm brainstorming things, but it's like when you build a mosque, you don't only have Muslim construction workers, and when you're making a show, you need people who know how to do story structure, guiding certain things and helping you with certain things. But in terms of details and stuff, there's me, who is, this is who it's about, and so that's like very much like the guiding thing of it, and I think to say the room has to be all Muslims it's just tough. It's like a tough thing, because it's like, again, we're all gonna have like really different experiences, to a place where like you might not even like reach what you need to reach. Again, like we celebrate the Eid on different days, like we have these things like we can't get past sometimes, and creativity trumps all, and that's how I hire people, and that's how I like build something, is like I know I'm gonna be the guiding voice, I'm gonna have the final word on everything. And that's a big part of the process. And so even with TV, you see a name on a script, even if you see it's just my name, there's a lot of thoughts, there's a lot of people who go into it, but ultimately the final say, from like the literal typing to everything, is mine on my show. And that's to the credit of everyone who's credited there, who made the show better. Everyone I've worked with in season 1, continue to in season 2, really helped me get further into my own goals. Like it's all people working to help me get to like my priority. And then in the humor of imams, I think the issue that I had in going into it is that I know there's nuances of funny, but I didn't really want to make fun of religious leaders, because then it just feels like, again, you start entering this territory of making fun of the religion. Because like I didn't want to be like, oh man, all religious leaders are just kind of like full of it. Because then like you kind of start doing the thing that I hate, which is like, it's almost expected to be like, ugh, this imam says one thing and then he does another thing, and it's kind of like, I don't know, like that's not, I want the responsibility and the problems and the issue to be on me, the person who is trying to be a good believer, who is a follower, who is doing all that. And so there's a lot of really funny stuff with imams, but I was afraid it would feel like pointing a finger at the faith. And again, yeah, we want to like point at certain things in our institutions and certain things that we need to like, but those are like so nuancy that it's just gonna feel like we're making fun of the religion. Like from an outside perspective, like if I'm someone who's not Muslim and I'm watching this show, like I don't want people to just be like, oh yeah, it just starts to feel kind of, I'm very afraid of it feeling reductive.
Yeah. No, has your experience with doing the show and everything, like I'm curious, and this, if you don't want to answer, it's fine, but like how it's affected your personal like faith? Has it, because you're focused on kind of how to communicate it and all that, and and it's just like such a unique experience too. It's like a big responsibility, but I'm sure that it's made you question things and just how.
Yeah, it's made me like need to be a better Muslim, because I don't want to feel like I'm like profiting off of this. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to feel like I'm using this part of my life and this faith and my identity to go and make stuff and get a recognition and get all of this stuff, and then the internal actual reality of it is rotting away. So if anything, it actually has motivated me to be to learn more and be engaged more, and to try and live up to my potential more, because I just like don't want to feel like a fraud, because there's the part of me that actually just might be a fraud, so at least I should try to avoid it as much as possible. And so like that it's very much affected that, because I like, okay, if talking about Islam is like raising the bar of my career, then it needs to be like also that bar needs to be being raised just like on a personal level. And like how that happens for me is like, that's the part I wouldn't talk about, because it's like I kind of want to have like, it's so weird filming yourself praying, it's like just such an intimate thing, and it's something I battled with a lot, and I felt like, again, it would be better to show a character that is relatable, who does it in a very relatable way. I tell this story a bunch, but when we first again, you start with one episode, we tested the pilot. And the pilot goes to these test audiences, and because it started at a mosque with Arabic being spoken, I think it was a very high number, it was like around 80% or something, something like that, overwhelmingly thought it was a show tonally in the vein of Homeland, and was a show about terrorism. Just because it started in a mosque and because they heard Allahu Akbar and they like heard all this stuff. So that is that's the relationship that we have with someone saying Allahu Akbar and going like this.
Yeah.
So it was actually like really excruciating to me on a level where I was like, why? Like I'm like filling myself pain. This is the thing I do, like that's personal, and then now I'm like, trust me, it's not a big check, but like I'm gonna get a check now for it, and like do this. It just feels weird, but I don't know. I just felt like I had to do it. I felt like there's it's just the noise is too loud in the other direction. That's like someone has to do it. Like it's gotta be shown in a certain way, and that has a lot of rippling effects on my personal relationship with it and my personal practice with it. But I like hope inshallah that it points again towards it being better than anything else.
I read somewhere in one of the articles that you were praying at one of the studios, and you were thinking like, has anyone ever prayed like in Hollywood? I'm like just curious about some of the challenges you face as a practicing Muslim in Hollywood. Which other like Muslims in there have described as like literally hell.
Yeah.
We know a guy that works in Hollywood.
Kamran Pasha.
Yeah,
He described it as Jahannam.
yeah, he said he works in Jahannam. And yeah, so I mean, it's very interesting. I also noticed that thing about you praying in the studio.
It's probably true. No one has ever put their head down in sujood.
But the things I think people have, we just like haven't talked about it. You know what I mean? And it's like it's. I think that someone has, and I was just wanting to almost put out like the bat signal of like, hey, who else? I mean, it's really like even it's. And it happened, right? It's like I made this thing, and then, Mahershala called me, and he was like, dude, where you been? Like, I've been trying to, he's like, I've been praying in Hollywood for 15 years. I didn't know who else was there. And so it's really exciting because it is. There are other people. It's just, we don't know. And so in terms of, like, have I felt weird about it? No, I mean, again, like, I could be anything, right? So it's like people don't look at me, certainly, at least didn't used to, now they do, but didn't look at me with a certain cultural, idea attached. So it was kind of more of just, it was like a little bit like being in the closet about it a little bit, where I've been in LA for 8 years, and a friend of mine, my friend Ari, who created the show with me, actually was like, yeah, it took me like, he was like, it took me 2 years to realize how Muslim you actually were. He was like, it was probably like 2 years before I was like, hey man, I gotta go pray. Like I didn't lead with it. Yeah. But again, this is a generational thing. Like it's cool now, on a level, and that's its own trap, because you don't want to just sit in anything like that. It should just remain the same regardless of what the weather is. Like whether it seems cool, whether it seems crazy, whether it seems whatever, which it'll go and fluctuate no matter what. But I happen to be standing on the timeline of the time where I don't have to change my name, talking about it is well received, and that's where we're at now. For all I know, the president we have now does not just 1 but 2 more terms when he becomes king or whatever the goal is, and then they start going back and finding people who are outspoken, like and it could be a whole thing. I don't know, but I'll still be who I am. But the time will change, and so that's the it's I did not experience the pressure of being it. So and that's just the time.
I mean, it's so beautiful because I think a lot of people, a lot of the struggles that you try to convey, are, that people can be so easily influenced by, I don't want to say that I'm Muslim or that I am. You reminded me actually of one of the favorite scenes in one of the episodes where you're with the Jewish woman, and then you tell her that you have to go pray, and then she was you know, she's like a party girl and all this sort of stuff, but then ironically, she really sort of admires you when you have to go out and pray. And that was like
that's
another
what, it's all,
really
because I'm gonna like start fasting Ramadan, and I'm like, we can't, which is funny. It's a scene my mom loved. She like actually really liked that scene. She's like, you know, you're doing something wrong, but then you do, and so you stop. That's like ability, you know. It's like her, like I'm like, Mom, but I did the thing like 2 episodes ago. She's like, oh no, you're good.
How are we doing on time? So we should leave some time for Q&A. Yeah. So, did anybody write any questions, or and we've been so engaged in the conversation that okay, I don't know. So now I don't think.
The note is still here, so.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Why don't we? You know what we typically do to try and condense time is we have like 2 or 3 people ask their question and let you answer. So does anyone have a question? Okay, let's go this way. Go ahead, Amir.
Yeah, I thank you so much. I really enjoyed hearing your ideas and your flexibility when it comes to dealing with the conflicts or contradictions between a world of definitives, everything is set and told and ruled on, and the world of unknowns or trajectories or new issues to which maybe we need to find a rule or a ruling or a definition. How do you personally deal with it? You're surrounded by both realms of unknowns and knowns, or at least to the level that every young man like you would be in, knowing some about the religious rulings and encountering all these occasions and possibilities to contravene or go through or ignore or not. I'm not asking for personal experiences. I'm asking about your thoughtful approach to this matter, because every one of our young members in the community, in our families, has this dichotomy in front of him or her, and they are grounded in their families' moral foundations. On the other hand, they go out with friends, they live in the real world, and they want to sort of balance them out or try to find a justification or explanation. I'm not asking about your personal experience. I'm asking about your thoughts about how one would,
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I actually can only answer my personal experience.
That's fine. I mean,
because
it's all
I
up
can't.
to you.
Yeah, because I can't really. I would never want to give a thought on how anyone should do it, because I don't know what I'm talking about, other than like the limit of what I know is like so narrow, much narrower than even you would imagine. How little I know, and so and I'm not even saying that like it's just the truth. To me, I just look at what you said was really interesting, between you kind of have the family and you maybe have the rulings, you have faith, you have all these things, and then you also go out and you're in the real world. And I think the part about the real world is really what's interesting, because it's kind of about like constantly framing like what is real, what is the real world, like and how do you calibrate yourself to a place where you can see reality for what reality is and what it's not, and then we're constantly tricked by what is real and what's not real. And I think that's what I go through, it's what a lot of people go through, it's what this character goes through, and so I kind of am constantly just testing my life of like, when am I actually seeing reality for what reality is, or when am I just like following only my desires and only my ego, and what helps keep what in check. And so even if I think about any regrets I have, like for my making this show, my past, like anything, like the only thing I wish I did different was that I had kept all my prayers and like drank more water. Like that's literally it. Like I literally feel like if I keep all my prayers and I drink water, like I'm fine. Like I start seeing reality for what reality should be, and then I start doing like the things I'm supposed to do. When I feel like I'm chasing just like my ego or whatever, I'm always like, I haven't prayed and I'm thirsty, I didn't drink. Like I did not drink water for the whole day, and I find myself in this situation that is insane.
I'm a lot. That's great. Okay, sorry, I should have like had a couple people. So Anthony and then Adil, and then we'll go that way. So why don't we have a couple of questions first, and then.
Assalamu alaikum. I actually wanted to say that I initially wasn't going to watch your show because I guess I'm a black convert, and so
Yeah.
I have a different experience with Islam and with this country. But I actually ended up watching it, and one of the things that struck me was as someone that's kind of paradoxically like an outsider, because like the whole issue of race is pretty subtle for me. Right? Like you turn on the news, like, oh yeah, I'm totally black.
Yeah.
Walk in the masjid, oh, I'm totally black. So it's interesting for me to see like a dramatization of kind of the things that I guess are paradoxically for me like external, because like I'm not at the same time one of you, but I am also because I'm Muslim. And so like I guess one of my favorite scenes was when the character that's Ramy's mother picks up the black girl
Yeah.
at the Uber, and she's talking about like the hair.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you know, damn, like that's in that one little scene, like he totally sort of got like, even though like I guess you told us you're gonna talk about race in the next season, like that is a little piece of it there. One of the things I wanted to ask is I guess one of the things that I wouldn't say concerned, but a question I had was, it's not necessarily about representation, but more so I kind of have a fear as a black Muslim of the black Muslim narrative being sort of overwritten.
Yeah.
Not, I guess, overwritten by the sort of immigrant experience, because I mean, let's face it.
Overwritten or overridden? Like overrided?
Yeah, basically,
okay,
like yeah, overridden.
Yeah.
Because as you were saying, like, you know, there are white passing black people. Like I have some in my family, but like most of us aren't. And so there's a kind of there's an element of race that makes it, and class, that makes it a lot easier for the immigrant community to tell its stories than blacks. Even like I think I can't remember what someone just said, that something about you being a pioneer, but I'm like, in my head I was thinking, but there have been a slew of black comedians, Muslim comedians that have been around for a while, and they're just forgotten because they're black and they're not white passing, or they're not out of or whatever. And so that's a really salient fear that I have of our stories being selectively appropriated, and then or even completely overridden by the fact that we're not light skinned and we have kinky hair or whatever. Or in my case, no hair.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, yeah, I mean, and
once again, let's, before you answer, just to get more in, I'm sorry about that.
Oh,
so Adil,
okay.
we're gonna have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Well, my question was more for Dr. Khalid. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just to that point, it's weird, man, because it's like press, and so it's like there's this press of like you read an article and they're like, it's revolutionary, it's trailblazing, it's all this stuff, and I'm like, I mean I didn't see any of that. It's also like, yeah, sure, I'd rather hear that than this is unwatchable or like what is happening here. To me, the only part of this that I would ever claim, like in any time anything came out of my mouth of me, I'm doing something I haven't seen or something that I feel is like first or whatever it might be, is leading with the practicing, believing, spiritually aspirational characters, which I hadn't seen in stand-up and I hadn't seen on film in a way that wasn't in that category of like straight to VHS kind of thing. And that is the only thing that I felt like we were bringing to the table in terms of like something feeling proprietary, but it's not even proprietary, but it's just like leading with it was the thing that I wanted to do. and even like when Grace was just mentioning, you know, probably no one else prayed on that lot, and I'm like, no, I know they did. Like I want to find them. You know what I mean? And I know that there's this history of people who are Black and Muslim that like it's like just not, you know, it doesn't get its light in the way that it does. It should. It's something we're talking about now that we, you know, in our second season that we're going to cover, but it won't be enough. It's just like, I know it won't be. Like, we're only going to have another just 10 episodes, and again, that's not the lead character, you know what I mean? Like, it needs,
Yeah, and
it's
I don't
something
think
that needs its own show.
I don't think it's on you. I think it's a
No,
community.
I know, it's a community,
So I want to
thing,
put it on you.
No,
per
I
se,
know,
yeah.
but like, it's really important to bring up, and I really respect the point, and it's something that, like, this is, when I was in, I didn't really meet Black Muslims until I went to college. And I used to think all Black Muslims were like Elijah Muhammad, like pre-Malcolm going to Mecca, like that's the only category of Black Muslims. Like, that's what I used to think. I thought that until I was like 18. That's how sheltered I was to knowing that. And then I went to college, and then I came here, and I like learned more. So these problems are like so in our community. It's like so a thing that like we don't ever talk about. And so the light that we're gonna shine on it through our shows is a bit more. It's from the perspective of this Arab community, realizing that they don't know, but that also isn't. It's just not gonna be enough. And I. Yeah, I share your feelings. I share your fear. I should share your fear for Black people in general. Like I one of the things I hate most that Arabs do is be like, "Yo, man, we're the new." It's stop. Shut the like. No, like we're not. We're not. And any assignment of that or any conflation of that is very frustrating. Yeah. So I hear you.
I just was curious to hear from you, Dr. Khalid, what the Islamic tradition has said about the role of art in societies generally over the course of time, and where a show like Ramy falls on that spectrum, you know, a show that depicts sin in the way that it does, and without having that straight to VHS kind of tone to it, where it preaches. Where does a show like that fall on that spectrum, and what is that spectrum even?
You know, it's this is might be an odd association for a lot of people, but when I saw the show, and other than the prayer part, maybe after the prayer and dua part, what it reminds me of, throughout the Islamic tradition, there was a very active tradition of poets.
Yeah.
The medium was poetry, and the
some of those poets. I know what you were reading, man. Those have categories of their own. I've seen those poems.
There's erotica, but there's also poetry that is struggling with fate, struggling with desire. I mean, and it's amazing because what always amazed me about this whole tradition is its biting honesty. In the same way we have Sufi poetry that is so pious that when you read it, you just feel worthless. You feel, I am a horrible Muslim. I can never live up to that. Oh my God, I mean, this person literally has seen Allah. What the hell am I? But then you go and you read this poetry that really, like, Abu Ala al-Ma'ari, it says, رأيت المنايا خط أشواق من تصب تمته ومن تخطئ يا رمي. I saw death, a meaningless arrow. Whoever it strikes dies, and whoever it misses. I mean, he's struggling with the very idea of death. So, on the one hand, it's very easy for imams to condemn the honesty of that show and to say bad Muslim, haram. But in doing that, we're also
the reason the Islamic civilization thrived is that it didn't try to engineer and run human beings like a military commander does. And when imams try to become these hegemonic social engineers, they'll invariably fail. Invariably fail. And so you're just a modern form of poetry.
No, I mean, I would argue that, like at that time, when those poems came out, that was way more popular than Hulu. Like people were, that is, it's huge for the time. Yeah, it's huge for the time. And I was talking about this with my sheikh, and you know, there were, you know, a lot of feedback on the show of like, you know, oh, this is made for America, or this is made for the white gaze, or whatever it might be. But the denouncing of discussing these things, wait for the white gaze. Yeah, gaze. Yeah. although the other, it might have been made for the other. They're a huge fan base. I hear from them all the time. They're great people. They love the show. But this I've heard this criticism of like, oh, this show is just made for white people. But the truth is almost the response to it, and this idea that it can't exist ignores our tradition, which is that art has existed, that has gone even further, and it ignores that tradition, and what it actually practices is what is almost like a little bit of like a Christian interpretation of Islam. Right. So it's actually like
puritanical.
Puritanical. So it's like the denunciation of it is performed more in the white gaze than, or the white perspective, whatever you want to call it, than the actual piece itself. And the place the criticism is coming from ignores our tradition.
I mean, I won't name the sheikh because all of you will know him. He passed away now, but when I was and I wasn't the norm, by the way. I mean, in Egyptian society, I was a minority, and the minority was a very good Muslim, right? You know, a Muslim going on the straight path, who is doesn't do haram stuff, doesn't want to go out to do what is it called, where all the kabarehat are.
The clubs and stuff?
The kabarehat, the Shara al
Cabaret?
Shara al Haram.
Oh, Shara al Haram, yeah.
So, I mean, when you grow up, all the kids in your school.
That was nice how you pretended not to know the name of the street.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it's called. Oh, man, I never went. That's good. It's a good,
I don't know this
good
stuff.
detail,
The performance of piety, man.
Yeah, no.
You have to perform piety.
You're doing great.
Yeah. So, but you know, you can't expose the performance.
Yeah, you know.
like a heckling audience, man. So what's that street that you know, I don't know, and then you have your friends, you know, they're all interested in. But I actually had a sheikh who said, you know, if Allah has created you that way, where your impulses, he assigned Abu Nawas and tons of these naughty poets to give you a sense of real life, and I mean to take away the stint of the puritanical, or to try moderate the puritanical stint in you. And I often fear for American Islam that is in institutions, that it has nothing to do with the life of our youth. That, you know, you go to the mosque, we give wonderful khutbahs, and then, but you don't find your age group in the masajid, and you don't find them tearing in our khutbahs, sitting there. In fact, a lot of times, if your age group exists in the khutbahs, they're falling asleep during the khutbah, and they're absent during Sunday programs. And so, I'd much rather struggle with the real world of Ramy than live in a false paradigm that is so sanitized, but it has very little to. And meanwhile, I mean, one of the things that I've wondered why I know so many Muslims your age who grow up and they say, "Oh, my parents are Muslim.
Yeah.
We're not Muslim anymore."
Yeah.
And I wish I knew the secret formula that, because I'd much rather, I mean, the secret formula that kept you Muslim. You know, do you know that secret formula?
I don't know, my dad is like, he plays mind tricks. Like he I remember him doing this thing where he was like, look, my job is to show you Islam, and you're gonna do whatever you want. And he just kind of like walked out of the room, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. Like he made like he did something where he was like, it's my job to show you, and then you decide or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, it worked. Maybe it worked, but truly, like I can't even. It's like I'm always giving my parents credit. I love my parents, but I can't even. I just remember praying and being like, this is where I feel the best. That's really what, to me, connection's prayer. Like, even, like, over anything, just being like, this is where I feel something more than I feel anything. And so that I don't know. I don't know how to put anything on that.
How were you when you started to pray, and were you always consistent with prayer?
I would be like I mean, I'd go like back and forth, but I mean, you know.
But you always came back.
Yeah, not to get into nuances of it, but yeah, it was, yeah, and now, you know, struggle, you know, like, again, that's probably what I like regret most about the first season, is that like the stretches where you're like going crazy and working and then you don't keep all your it's like that's so an active struggle, but always going back and always kind of knowing.
Let's get more
Okay,
questions.
last few questions. Okay, let's go ahead.
Sure. So I have a question for Ramy about the burden of representation and whether it's like a double-edged sword, because I see a real tension between what you set out to do, which is to tell the story of a Muslim's moral struggle, and correct me if I'm wrong about that, but then there's this other thing that you have to do in order to do that, which is representation, where you have to talk about these types of Muslims, you have to talk about women, you have to talk, representation is obviously important, but it's a battle you can't win because, like you said, there's always something you're going to leave out.
Yeah.
And furthermore, it's a battle that you wouldn't have to deal with if your character were Jewish or Christian, and it was their moral struggle.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, there's also this like trend in Hollywood where representation is seen as like the end and not the beginning. Like you can have a film like Aladdin and it can be championed because like Muslims consulted on it, but it's the same Orientalist tropes, and now you just have like brown characters played by brown actors, and that's great. But like I guess my question to you is like, what have you learned from trying to balance that tension, and like what advice would you give to Muslim creators who want to follow in your footsteps? Because this has to change at some point, right? That tension.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, right now there's just a lot of opportunities of how to make work and how to get work out there, and I think that you've seen it with a lot of other groups when there's a show, and let's say like removing white, so let's say you have black families show, you know, there's various tones. There's Atlanta, super weird, and there's Blackish, you know, and I feel like our show just fits a certain category, and I feel like there's a lot of other tones that can be struck that take these issues from a lot of different angles, you know. Aziz Ansari did a Ramadan episode. I remember I watched it and I was like, well, that's not my Ramadan. I want to make something that I think would be a more interesting way to watch Ramadan. People watch my Ramadan episode and they'll say, I don't know what that was. I want to make my Ramadan episode. So it's like, this is, we have a lot of opportunities. I think we're going to have a lot of at-bats. I don't think it's, and I think merely from the place of there's just all these places right now that want to make shows. So there's just like, it's just like, and they make the same show 4 times anyway, regardless. And there's no reason why we can't be part of that conversation. That's on one end. And then in terms of like the advice that I would give, I would give this advice to anyone, but I would especially give this advice to Muslims who are making stuff, which is be really careful with anticipating or letting what you think other people are going to think affect the work, and be really careful with when you do make something and you have it go out, letting the criticism seep into how you make what you make, because the voices on Twitter Like I would get really specific now and say, like, if you're trying to please Muslim Twitter, don't.
Yeah.
There's no point. It's 100 people. It's maybe 1,000. Like it's not. It's just so not all Muslims. Like in the same, and I'm not equating them. I'm not saying they're terrorists. But terrorists are not all Muslims. Muslim Twitter is not all Muslims. There are things that have been said about me and my show and my stand-up and all those things that if I actually like took them to heart, I wouldn't make anything. You know, I would, and I really genuinely I have looked at them and I like laugh at them and I actually send some of them to my friends and my friends will send them to me and we'll like joke about them and I'm like feel very blessed to be able to have that levity around it. And of course there are moments where like it seeps in and you're like, oh man, like this doesn't feel good. But I guess the advice I would give is it's going to be okay, and don't try and make something to please people online because you won't. If it's your main goal and then you put it out and then you don't please the people online, you're going to be so upset because you didn't make the thing you really wanted to make. You tried to engineer something for praise and you tried to engineer something for this community that is faceless, literally, and you didn't do the thing that you wanted to do. And so for me, part of doing this and part of it receiving certain levels of criticism that it's gotten, like I was really glad to, and I've had Muslim women who wear the scarf, who are comedians and stand-ups, who have come up to me and thanked me and said, yo bro, thanks for taking the bullet. Like, because whatever I put out is not gonna get as much hate as whatever you put out. And I was like, yeah, you got it. Like go do the thing and don't worry about what people are gonna say. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Again, I have friends who look for it and say if there's something about the show and they're like, yo, you gotta fix this, you gotta work on that, of course. But like as a creator, you're gonna be self-correcting anyway, because you watch your thing, you know, you watch it. I watched my whole series 4 days before everyone else watched the whole thing, right? Like before that, you're in the process, you're editing episode 10 while you're episode 2, and you're kind of like scattered all over the place. The first time I sat down and like watched the whole thing and saw what I made, 4 days later, everyone got to do that. And actually it leaked, so everyone in Egypt had already. It's like a bunch of Egyptians being like, yo, dude, this dude's in Egypt, man, this guy's... I'm like, how did you know? Like, how did you watch the thing? So that'd be my advice, is to just like not make things for that. And again, I don't have any disrespect towards Muslim Twitter. I actually think great things come out of Twitter. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about the Egyptian revolution, but I do think that there's a lot of good things that can happen. But it can't be the barometer, you know, because real people, I'm not calling them fake, but I'm just talking about the people you really interact with, they don't have time to be on Twitter. They don't have time to sit and type a thread that goes 100. They don't have time to write an article. They're busy, they're working, they're living their lives, they have 2 jobs, they're struggling with a thing, and they turn it on. And I hear from those people. I hear from people who write me an email and they're like, yo, I never write an email, but I had to write you an email. You know, and I see people on the street, and I see people at the mosque, and I see people at all these places where if I only read Twitter, I would be like, oh my god, every Muslim hates me. And then if I like stepped out into the world, I'm like, oh my god, wait, people are like really responding to this. And it's really important to like have that calibration, right? Because that's the one thing that I would say, because our community is not, you know, the same as other communities. And do a lot of people watch these videos?
Which videos?
The videos you guys make, because I'm gonna say something I don't know if a lot of people watch. I'm gonna say it anyway. Yeah. I'm gonna say it anyway.
Yeah.
So look, like I would say
what you're saying about Twitter, it applies completely.
But
to
this point, and
to-
Grace, maybe you could speak to this. This is something I think the Asian community did an amazing job with. They all rallied around Crazy Rich Asians, and they were like, "This is good." They don't feel that way, but they said they did, because they were like, let's just say it was good, and then they're gonna make more stuff. Muslims don't do that. We don't support each other. We're like, that guy's got to get in the ground. Like that's not us. That's not whatever. Like we don't. That's not how our community like reacts to stuff. Yeah. And I respect everyone in the cast of Crazy Rich Asians. And everyone did a good job. But they don't. You know what I mean? They're not like shooting each other down the way that we do. You know, like we're just like that guy's got to end, and this one, and it's like it's almost like we're silencing ourselves before we can speak. You know, like there's no. So we do a lot of the work. So it's like it's even this perception of, oh man, does the white network allow Muslims to talk? And it's like, Muslims don't allow Muslims to talk. Like we don't even have like our own echo chamber is like flawed. And so that's the thing that I would say is very specific to our community that we have to be really careful about.
We are brutal with each other.
Yeah.
It's really, really important advice. Did you have, I know we have probably time for you.
Yeah, no,
That's good, keep going.
the comment I was gonna make was actually, this stuff feels necessary into it. When I was watching the show initially, the first few episodes, I realized that one reaction I was having was kind of like my inner uncle was coming out. Being like, this is not the way we're supposed to be showing Muslims on TV. We have one shot. He's ruined the shot we have. And I'm like, wait, why am I started to interrogate that feeling. Like, why am I putting that onus on him, and why am I reacting this way? And I started to think that, like, you know, when we were growing up, I was also 11 when the Twin Towers happened, and you watch these things, and you kind of, over the last, you know, 3 decades almost, I've kind of internalized the fact that when the TV says Muslims are X and Y and Z, defensively we're always like, no, Muslims are not X, Y, and Z, we're ABC, we're this, we're great at things. And then we kind of are defensive and reactive, being like, we follow the same trap of the we. Like, we are this, we are that. And I'm like, Ramy just some dude, and we should allow the story to manifest itself and show it, and not put that pressure of like, this is how he's supposed to be acting. Yeah. And then, you know, it could make, you know, we were touching on things of like boring television, stuff like that, but I thought I just want to make that comment of the trap I found myself falling into when I'm trying to also, you know, try to like, you know, not fall in these traps all the time, and I'm like, oh, I just did.
No, yeah. I mean, also our other representation is like the news, and I feel like my show is definitely a bit better than that. I mean, at least a little. Yeah.
Comes close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have a question, Rita?
Sure. It might be like more of a reflection for all of us for the future, but something that we talk about a lot here, Dr. Abul talks about a lot, is like the essence of our faith is social justice, and like that's kind of our calling as Muslims. And to me, like, I try to keep in mind truth is beauty, is justice. And another thing is like that came up in your comment, the disengagement of youth and what to do about that. So I've been thinking about this, and like in the context of what you did, like again, I'm like the exact same age. I was also 11 at that time. When it came to like law school, do something else time, I really wanted to go to law school, and I did because I wanted to learn about social justice, like for whatever reason. But you know, where we are, however many years later, doing something where you were more called to art and living that truth, perhaps has done like a lot more for social justice. So I was curious about Dr. Abul's perspective, perhaps your perspective, but maybe something just to think about for all of us, about like, not necessarily, maybe our like proselytizing role, and also our, you know, how to treat the next generation. For me, I didn't come up going to Sunday school or anything like that. Like, I found my Islam later in life. And when I hear like, oh, we need to engage the youth or do something like that, I don't know how much I identify with that, or what the right way to do it is, because it does feel like Islam is such a personal thing. So I don't know if I'm thinking about like what to keep in mind for myself, advice either of y'all have, or just something for all of us to think about, like between trying to do things that are like overtly and clearly in furtherance of social justice or in furtherance of anti-Islamophobia or whatever, versus like just kind of following our calling, if it's comedy or art or something else that might like just circuitously lead us to creating something beautiful in the world. How to like keep our, what we're all thinking about, and keeping our compass aligned toward like the right North Star or Mecca or whatever.
That's for you, man.
I would say, you know, I really take to heart the hadith of the Prophet, كل ميسر لما خلق له, that Allah facilitates, if you're true to yourself and you listen to your conscience, Allah facilitates your path, which is uniquely yours. And I take that hadith really to heart, because there has to be a reason why Allah created me without any sense of, no sense of humor whatsoever. and then Allah creates someone like Ramy, who is able to laugh
I mean, I'm much better at crying than laughing. You know, that's my talent. And there has to be wisdom. There has to be a reason. And I think for me to not take the practice of law as a social cause would be a betrayal of who I am. So I mean, when I take on these cases where I go out and I litigate on part of people who've had their human rights violated, and I do it out of a sense of my Islamic conviction, and I believe that is my salah. I mean, of course I do salah, but when I vindicate someone or speak on behalf of someone who has their human rights violated, I actually very literally feel closer to Allah. I feel that Allah smiles upon me, that Allah comforts me. But at the same time, it would be completely absurd if I expect that from an artist whose job it is to get in touch with their own true emotions. And in fact, the way I see this as part of Allah's tapestry is I look at what Ramy does, and then I always think to myself, what are the ways that I can build upon what he presented in my quest for social justice? In what ways can I cite episodes? In what ways can I cite narratives? Can I even borrow jokes and retell them badly? You know, and I think that where you make sense of you know, when Allah tells us in the Quran that Allah made you different and you will remain different, and that is part of why Allah created you, is difference. You know, you either say, yeah, we're different, okay, fine, or you actually take it to heart. And everything in life has just taught me that the diversity is part of the beauty. And, you know, and not everyone that goes to law school would I expect them to be a social justice fighter. Because some students seem to have an enormous talent for making money, and some students seem to just have no patience for the stock market or tax law or corporation law, and they excel on everything after you. So I go to the people that Allah has given a gift to making money and tell them, okay, fine, support me. Do you want to you play part of your tapestry? Is God has allowed to make money. Now, enable people like Ramy and people like me to exist. That's how it has to work. I mean, I don't think Allah creates someone and then says, be something else other than I created you. It's unjust.
May I make a point on that?
It's up to, because we're...
Sorry, we're out of time, but we have, just to let someone else have the
we promised you that we would finish promptly.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just,
Assalamu alaikum.
Dr.
Dr. Afadal, if I may ask you to weigh in on a question that I've been wondering about for a while. And it's a very unique conversation between a scholar of the law, but also an Usuli and a comedian and an artist. Ramy and I are friends. We've talked about some of these questions, but I'd be very interested to hear your take. You know, I have a thesis that the law and the ulama and the fuqaha are basically at the precipice of having to confront an important modern question, which is whether or not acting is basically a valid profession. Mm-hmm. If it is, then why shouldn't there be a rukhsa for discharging your work the same way there are Muslim male OBGYNs, for example? Mm. They engage in something which is shar'an, zahiran, completely haram, but on an exception basis because there's a medical need and a valid profession, they take advantage of this rukhsa, if you will. The same could be said for an actor. You know, if Ramy has to be on camera kissing a woman because it's part of his role in a show, it's zahiran haram, but perhaps there's an exception. But this can only be given by a proper fatwa, by a mufti. Could you imagine an emerging area of such law and legal thinking? And if so, who should be pioneering that? How can that be brought into the world? Would that be a good thing? Would that be a bad thing? Would love to hear your take.
You're asking for a fatwa?
Come on, man. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Just come on. Just, he made a good point.
I'm not prepared to give a fatwa, but I'll say this. This is fiqh al-nawazil. I mean, this is the nazila, the real nazila is
English translation, please.
tough issues of law that don't have a precedent that you can just ride on. Because lawyers or jurists look for precedents and you connect to a precedent and you ride on it. But when there are no precedents, it is embarrassing that in this day and age, and we're still talking about Islamic law and its position on acting, because theater, while Muslim jurists were aware of theater in the Greek tradition, drama had died all over the world for a long time between the Greeks and Shakespeare. And what the art form that they contended with was architecture and drawings and poetry, and there's a lot of fatwa on that. But drama didn't come into the life of the Muslim world until colonialism, practically riding on the coattail of colonialism. And I don't think drama needs a special rukhsa as a necessity. I think drama is a completely legitimate art form. Now, within the drama, there are some really tough things. Like, I noticed that Ramy's show didn't have nudity. There were several occasions where you could have had.
Yeah.
And I respected that, because I wouldn't be prepared to say nudity is okay. I cringe when I see a kiss. Now, of course, I'm going to tell you the naughty thing, is that I can point to several occasions in the Islamic tradition, even literalist jurists like Ibn Hazm and his Tuq Hamama, when, it say, okay, go ahead and kiss her, and the sin is on me. Meaning, you know the story, right? If I would deal with the issue on fatwa, I would not want to open the doorway so that people can, because the minute you say kissing is okay, then you could end up with. But people are going to kiss anyway. I mean, whether you issue a fatwa in support or not. So it's how you negotiate the status of the law. Do you want the law to become marginalized and ignored in real life, or do you want the law to remain relevant? And these are, these are really challenging issues. As challenging as when Ramy has to sit there and think, well, to what extent am I representing Muslims, and who are the Muslims that I'm really representing? What I'll tell you is, when I see a show like Ramy's, I sincerely, from all my heart, I actually included you in my dua. I say, I pray to Allah, okay, whatever sins might have been committed, please forgive them, because I believe the greater good exceeds the sins that have been committed. Okay. And so I wish that other Muslims would, the way they can support is to sincerely have the attitude of Ramy, you're our son. I mean, in the same way that my son, I ask Allah, I know that my son didn't live his life as a model Muslim. Like all human beings, he struggled. So, and I do dua sincerely for my son. May Allah please forgive whatever he's done, and look to the goodness in his heart, because he's a beautiful human being. The same dua I do for Ramy. And I pray that other Muslims have that attitude, so that we can nurture our artists, so we can celebrate our artists, and we can tell our artists, we love you. We love the fact
that you humanize us, and without you, we'd be just demonized, as we always are. But they need to feel loved, not vilified. So I love you, Ramy.
I would kiss you, but it's haram.
And on that note, I think that's a good place to end. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Ramy, so much. And may Allah bless your parents, especially. That's what I always think of your parents, by the way.
Oh,
and
man.
May, you know, they've done a wonderful job. Do you have sisters or brothers now?
I have a younger sister. Yeah.
They've done a wonderful job. Whenever I see a human being that is haram, immediately it tells me more about their parents than it tells me about their parents.
We have some party gifts for you.
Oh my God.
Merch.
You see this shirt?
Yeah,
Oh, great.
It's like fresh off the
Oh, amazing.
so we have
This is
all-
the Usuli creed.
Yeah,
Oh, I
so
love it.
like the agent for change, seeker of beauty, lover of justice, example of mercy, kindness, practitioner, critical thinker, spiritual elevation, Muslim.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for everyone for coming. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we've made a little bit of American history here, because normally scholars and artists don't engage in any type of conversation.
They don't.
And I think it's really it's so badly needed. And the more there is of it, the more you'll feel supported and I'll feel supported.
Sure.
And I think that's because you're absolutely right. And I know that Racist Family had the same precise attitude that you described towards that movie.
Yeah.
Crazy Rich Asians, they're like, it's like it's not us, but we're gonna support it.
We're gonna support it. Yeah.
And we don't have that. I should be really ashamed. Why don't I just support it?
Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
It's
so
really
much.
wonderful.